You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, this is Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com, the ChrisVossShow.com. And now a man who's a millionaire buying eggs in the 2023 egg crisis of America here going on. A friend of mine just bought a whole flat of eggs, and I think spent $50 or something crazy like that. It's a good time to be a veganese if you aren't already. I haven't noticed because I don't eat eggs much. But yeah, wow. Okay, so you can now put eggs evidently in your 401k portfolio, but something tells me those eggs are just as good as investing in FTX. If you're familiar with that, people 5 years from now are going, we have to Google what's going on.
Hello. Oh my God. Yeah.
All right, bit of a station break there with the internet, guys. We're on with Thom Dennis. We're going to be talking to him today. He's a co-author of a book. Two books, actually. The Art of Risk and Reward by Shelley Jorgensen. And he contributed to that book and another. We'll be talking a little bit about that. And we're going to be talking to him about leadership and business and everything else that goes into it. Thom is a change agent with skills and strategies. He's got a master in it. Expertise as a certified facilitator accredited by the CQ Center and an NLP master practitioner. He's got 17 years experience as an officer in the Royal Marines, and having worked extensively around the world, Thom brings all of his experience together as CEO of Serenity in Leadership and as a speaker, facilitator, and change agent, consultant, and educator. For the last 30 years, his career has been dedicated to facilitating transformation through organizational change. He is passionate about resolving the breadth of issues around good leadership and strives to bring healing and renewal in the face of dysfunction in the workplace. Welcome to the show, Thom. How are you?
Chris, thank you very much. I loved your introduction. You've got to stand up and dance when you hear that, haven't you?
You do. And what's nice is it brings a great pace to the show. Most great comedy and entertaining shows, there's kind of a pace. And so it sets a great tone and pace for the show. So welcome to the show. Give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs in the sky.
It's Serenity in Leadership, or one word, .com.
There you go. So talk to us a little bit about your life path. What sort of journey did you have, upbringing, and what made you get interested in leadership and principles in business and stuff?
Wow. So I was very formed at an early age because I went to boarding school. And some of your listeners have probably heard about the British system, but it does actually form people, not necessarily well, but it certainly forms them. And you can see that amongst British politicians in particular. So I went through that, and then I became a lifeguard for a while, which influenced me very much later on. But then I decided to try and be a pilot. So I went to commercial pilot license, pilot school. And halfway through, I think I probably scared my instructor a little bit too much because they invited me to leave. So I went into industry. I found the dirtiest, nastiest job I could do, which earned me enough money to carry on flying because I didn't like somebody telling me I couldn't do something. So I carried on flying until I got my a private pilot's license, but then really it was a bit too much. So the business took me on, and I learned all sorts of things about being a manager, and they sent me to school. And one of my old friends who'd been at the lifeguard with me in the swimming pool, he joined the Royal Marines, and he came back, and I just saw a different person. I mean, he was completely transformed, and I thought, well, that's pretty cool. I think I could do with a bit of that. So I walked into a recruiting office. It was just around the corner from the school they sent me to. I said, what does it take to join the Royal Marines? And he said, are you crazy? I said, well, probably. He said, right, well, come in and sit down. And we started to talk about it. So I joined and ended up spending 17 years there.
Wow.
Which was brilliant. You know, lots of adventures and moving around the world and doing various things. And so I left in 91 after the first Gulf War, and I'd been teaching at Greenwich at that time, leadership. And so I thought, well, what do I do? So I joined the only coaching company in the country at the time and trained as a coach, and then developed from there. Set up a business, didn't go too well. Set up another business, went slightly better.
Yeah.
And so on. And then having done all this coaching and facilitation, I thought I'd better go to school and find out what it is that I've been doing all this time. So that's when I did the master's degree in change agent skills. And that took me into coaching, facilitation, and changing cultures. And really, it's just developed from there over quite a long period of time. Serenity and leadership came later, really after a lot of explorations I did around exploring the masculine and the feminine, and how as I see it, the feminine is very suppressed in both men and women. You know, it certainly doesn't apply to all women, but an awful lot of very successful senior women have got to the top of organizations by being more of a man than being themselves. And so I'm looking for ways to bring back the feminine, because I think that's what we need.
Really? In leadership and running tribes and stuff like that. That's very interesting. You know, work in the kind of fields that are highly successful. I mean, it's a pretty masculine thing to be in those. I mean, you can't have emotion running those things. So it's interesting. So how long you've had your company now, Serenity and Leadership?
Well, Serenity and Leadership grew out of the original company, which was Phoenix Obsidian. So between the two of them, it's been 28 years, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you guys have a lot of people that work with you there. You have a lot of employees.
Not many employees. We use associates. I prefer that because I can bring in the particular expertise for a particular job.
There you go.
Yeah.
So what do you find most companies are struggling with, or maybe what leaders are struggling with nowadays?
Well, I think there's a lot of new challenges that have come. It's really difficult to be a CEO. You're beholden to the shareholders in particular, and what shareholders require, which is normally very short term, is not actually necessarily what's good for an organization. But on top of that, we've had the pandemic, and then a lot of employees have reviewed themselves and said, well, do I want to work in this way anymore? And a lot of them have said, well, actually, no. And a lot of the sort of the 50-year-old upwards have said, I've got enough to live on. I don't need to earn anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm off. So there's quite a large chunk of people in the older generations who have been lost to the business, and so CEOs now they've got to look at what is hybrid working, and how do we manage all these people who want to work from home, and how do we make the business work. And I think, you know, some people are very stuck and they want to go back to the old ways. And there's an awful lot of people saying, well, actually, no, I want to do this differently. So a big push in that way. On top of that, you've got things like mental health and well-being, which nobody talked about 10 years ago, frankly. But now it's a huge subject. You've got, after George Floyd, You've got people who, and I think a lot of CEOs have really resisted that. It's like it's I don't want to talk about that. It takes me away from the business. I need to attend to the figures. I need to make sure that things are functioning. And so they're being forced to look at lots of new things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like society is pushing organizations and corporations, where in the not that long ago, it was the other way around.
Yeah.
And so that puts a lot of stresses on CEOs.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the model has really changed with COVID. I work remotely, doing what I do since 2004. So I was used to doing whatever I want, whenever I want. But, suddenly everyone joined me in the Zoom world, and working remotely and online, and I'm like, well, welcome. I mean, I've been doing this. I'm kind of used to it. And now, everything's turned upside down. I imagine over in Europe where you're at, you guys are struggling with the same thing with remote workers that don't want to return to work, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's, well, in I don't know about all countries, but in many countries that you're having this shift.
Yeah. Yeah. Meanwhile, you've got people that have 30-year leases they sign on their office buildings, and they're sitting empty. I saw one company that they signed a 30-year lease, and they forced all their employees to come back, and their employees are pissed, and they're having to deal with it. But what are they going to do? You got a lot of people never saw this thing coming, but that's the way change works, right?
It certainly is. I always took my hat off to Wimbledon, the tennis tournament there. They were one of the very, very few companies that had pandemic insurance.
Really?
Yes.
Pandemic insurance? I didn't know. I would have bought some of that. Well,
well, there was a book I quoted on another podcast. I couldn't remember the name of the book, but it was called Inevitable Surprises. And in that, if you think about that, inevitable surprises, they're things that take people by surprise. But actually, if you think about it, it's bound to happen. And there was a chapter in the end of that book, which was all about pandemics.
Wow.
So, some people saw this coming.
Yeah. In 2004, the World Health Organization for the last 20 or 30 years, I've been hearing them say that there was a pandemic coming or something that would be really scary. Like, some of the movies we saw that were very apocalyptic. I remember in the 90s or 2000s, I watched a movie about some, virus with monkeys and everyone gets the disease, dies, and you're just like, holy crap. And so when the pandemic started, it really was going on. What do you think about the younger generation? What are you seeing in the younger generation with millennials and Gen Zs in leadership? Are they getting it? Are they adopting to it? Are they, because their versions, especially with the Gen Zs, is a very different work ethic.
Yes, it is. And hallelujah for that.
If you can call it an ethic, I don't know, or call it working. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, Gen Zers. I'm teasing you.
Well, I really respect them. Actually, I mean, I try and have an intern working with me, and I love doing that because the challenge and the thought process that they bring are so different to the older generations. And they're far less compromising. They want to, and I think a lot of organizations are having to learn that. People being recruited now are actually saying, well, what's the purpose of your organization? I need to know what your purpose is because I need to get behind it. If you don't have one, or your purpose is just to make money, you can sing for it. I'm going somewhere else.
Yeah. It's interesting, and they don't want to work one job either. They want to flirt about the thing, the company website or the company jobs. And my friends that hire Gen Zs, they're like, you hire them for one job and they want to do a bunch of other jobs. And you're like, no, this is the one you do. And then you earn your way to the other. So it's kind of interesting. And it's going to be interesting how they're, we saw what the millennials had an effect, and a lot of the electronic and apps and different things we have, the way we work now, come from the millennials. So it'll be interesting to see what they're contributing is. Does leadership seem to be a lost art? Because sometimes when I talk about leadership to people, they glaze over a little bit on me, or if I ask them what their leadership techniques or behaviors or skills are, sometimes I get a blank stare, like, I don't know. I just kind of do what I do. I don't really think about it.
How interesting.
Do you find a lot of leaders that you work with, they know their leadership style, they know how they're applying leadership and stuff?
I think that fundamentally leaders that are going to be successful in the future have got to know themselves.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think older leaders or managers have not applied themselves to. So you find that some successful leaders know themselves very well, but they haven't worked at it. It just happens that they've got that naturally. But there's a huge amount of, I was writing something about dysfunctional leadership the other day. Someone was asking the question, how do you handle a dysfunctional leader? And it's like, these people are blind and deaf to what's going on around them. And what used to be acceptable just isn't anymore. And so I really think that leaders people who aspire to leadership have got to explore themselves. What are their beliefs? What are their values? What drives them? What's their purpose in life? And how does that resonate or not with the organization they're working with? You get all these organizations who have all these, they spend a fortune with one of the big consultancies and they put all these values up on the wall. And then one day people come into work and they look at this and they say, oh, is that my value? I didn't know that. And it's a utter waste of money and time. So you've really got to enroll people, and it's much easier if they've got a sight of what drives them. And I think the younger generation are more conscious of that.
That's interesting. And it's true. There's a lot of insightful stuff you have to go to be a leader. I think some of the leaders I talk to, when they give me that blank back, they kind of have a toolkit they're working in their mind, but they don't really think about it. It's kind of become second nature, like it has for me. I mean, I can build a business in my sleep. I mean, the modeling and everything. I just know what to do. I don't even think about it anymore. Like I've had people say that to me. They're like, why are you doing it this way? Do you think? And I just know what to do. Yeah, I'm 55. I've seen it all. So but a lot of leaders, I think, at some time in their career, had to be introspective, had to really think consciously about what they were doing and what works. And I think after a while, they kind of get into subconscious mode and know what works. But it's always important, I think, to revisit that and to constantly be aware of what's going on, and of course changes in the environment of leadership. I know a lot of my friends that are leaders, like the newest generation, or like COVID coming in, they've got to adopt or adapt to that. That's
the point. Everyone throws around the word agile these days, but I think leaders do have to be agile. In the old days, you could have a structure, you could have a process, and you knew how to do things. But actually, things are moving too fast now. You can't depend on solid structures. You've got to be much more flexible and be able to move. It's like the old metaphor of the tree and the reed. The reed bends in the wind, and eventually the tree may fall down. So I think, leaders today who are being successful are much more fleet of foot. They're much more agile.
There you go. I mean, you have to be when it really comes down to it. Some of the things you've talked about too on the internet, how to create a culture where it's safe to speak out. Talk to us a little bit about that. There was an article you did for the HRdirector.com.
I did. You're right. It's I think in the old days, you arrived and your contract was do the work, we'll pay you for a certain amount of hours and you go home.
Mm-hmm.
And we, the management, we led. But today it's much more, as we've just been talking about, the younger generations. There's that sense of, well, what's my part in this? And you said some people want a couple of jobs. They want to be moving on in some way. So it's creating a culture where people feel safe to actually say, hey, this isn't working, or this isn't working for me. And as I say, in the old days, they tend to just be shot down. But what I found a lot is creating an environment where actually you can create a space where people can come and say, this is working for me, this is not working for me. I have an issue with this person and I want to address it. I want to be able to work through it. I think in the old days, so much was hidden. There's and actually we're learning that the more open we are, the more transparent we are, the more effective we are.
Do leaders, I mean, is that how important is that as an aspect as a leader to be transparent?
I think it's really important. I think it's really important, and that comes, Brené Brown, she talks about vulnerability and all that. But when a leader can stand up and say, hey, this is the situation, this is what I know, this is what I don't know, and this is what I propose to do about it. That sense that leaders in the old days sort of were very ego driven, and they felt like they had to show that they knew all the answers. Because otherwise people wouldn't follow them. But actually, and this takes us back to some of the feminine traits that really are needed that have been sort of excluded, is this ability to say, I don't know all the answers. And actually the best leaders are good at that. And what they do is they surround themselves with all the people who are good at the things that leader is not. So you have this setup of people who work together. It's a team. And I've seen a lot of teams where actually the leadership of the team revolves, and it's like they sit together and they say, right, this is the problem, who's the best leader for this? And somebody says, well, actually I've got some experience in that, or I think, and then they lead until they say, well, actually I'm now a bit out of my depth, I want to put it back into the middle, and somebody else picks it up. Hey, what an amazing way to lead. It takes so much ego out of it. You don't have to be proving things. You're just, as a team, producing the best result.
That's interesting to me. I learned this as a CEO years ago. I don't have all the ideas. I thought I kind of went through that phase that you mentioned earlier, where I thought I had all the good ideas, was smacking all the balls out of the park, and then I somehow started hitting foul balls. And I realized that I didn't have the corner on all the greatest ideas in the world. As a CEO, I didn't have all the great things. And then it became, learning to be, as a leader, to curate and to listen to my things. One of the mantras we had around my office that I stole from somewhere, maybe Tom Peters' book or some sort of book, but the basically this or maybe it was a friend or a business friend, but there was a mantra we took on, several mantras we took on. One was, the only stupid question is the unasked question. And so it really encouraged people to come forward and ask questions if they didn't know something. Because the worst thing you can work in is an environment where you're damned or people, look at you funny or think you're stupid if you go through training and then you don't ask questions anymore. And the one thing I learned the hard way is the person who doesn't really understand their job well is the person who's going to break something and cost, a machine to cost you $30,000. And they just somehow didn't get it in training. And there's some people that just don't get it, and they need different ways of training or facilitating or whatever. But around my office, we used to say the only unasked question is the only dumb question is the unasked question. So you're stupid if you don't open your mouth and tell us, what ask questions, or why do we do things, or whatever. And that created a pretty good environment for us, because people could come forward without being shamed. There wasn't like this, oh, you didn't learn that in training, you idiot. There was like, okay, well, let's get you up to speed. Let's try this as a training mechanism. Okay, here's what we do. The other thing is, I used to explain to my employees, it wasn't so much a like, go there and do this, work this machine that way. We'd explain to them why we did that and why we'd established that process, if you will. And that ended up being really smart, because since people understand why we did it that way, they were more comfortable with it. But also, they could maybe make nuances or innovations to why we did it that way, because they'd be like, well, the way you've set this up is kind of silly, Chris. You should have put A, B, C, D in this order instead of D, B, C, D, in this order, and you can save more money, or, be more efficient that way. I'm like, great. And so we try to encourage that I think it came from the Phil Fellman book, The Fifth Discipline, where we try to create a learning organization.
Yeah, but you were not just creating a learning organization, you were creating an organization where it was safe enough to people to speak out.
Exactly. Yeah. We did want it to be safe, because, like I said, the one guy who would always break something, burn something down, or cost me a fortune was the guy who didn't fully understand something in training, or he just needed more, or she needed more data or information. And sometimes they just needed maybe some training that was more specific to them. They say some people learn from training. There's some people learn kinetically, some people learn visually, some people learn auditory wise. And so, sometimes you just have to go, okay, well, what do we need to do to drill this into your head and get you to fully grasp it?
That's right.
There you go.
Yeah.
One thing you wrote about too that I was really interested on is you wrote an article talking about 10 leadership trends for 2023. Let's touch on some of that, because I think that's pretty relevant to the future of what's going out. One item, the first time you talked about, that I love is visionary storytellers. Talk to us a little bit about what that is and how a leader sets that tone.
Well, I think it's storytelling is enormously powerful.
Mm-hmm.
People can relate to stories far more than sort of instructions and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And laying out a vision, if you can paint a picture,
mm-hmm.
then people can engage with that, and it's something that they can position themselves in,
Mm-hmm.
and see them, so they can either they can or they can't see it. Either way, it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
See themselves in the future. So again, it's about the enrolling and
Mm-hmm.
getting people on board. And as you've described, if they don't understand, or they say, well, hang on a minute, does that actually make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It invites that kind of dialogue, which is really constructive.
Yeah, you quoted a gentleman named Dean Carter, who led HR and shared services, and he said, a leader for me is someone who has a compelling view of the future, and their way of looking at the future is very compelling to align behind. They always know their vision has to be possible, and the team needs to be able to clearly see their actions to get to be taken. That's so important to me, and I think that's what the big part of what a leader does. He sets a tone, he sets a vision, he sets a goal, he sets a destination. Steve Jobs going, we're going to build an iPhone. And one of my friends was on that team, and, Steve Jobs is asking people to, put a fully functional giant phone into this little space, a fax machine, a mail thing, a typewriter, a video cassette recorder, a camera, all these sort of technologies into this tiny little space, and then make it work. And even when he unveiled the iPhone, it was still crashing software wise. It didn't crash for him on stage, but the people that built it knew it was crashing. It was like just half a miracle it didn't crash on stage.
You know what he did there.
Mm-hmm.
For each demonstration he did,
he had the different.
He had a different phone, so he went to the and picked up.
Yeah, but he did hold the one phone and went through 3 to 4 motions, or 3 to 4 openings, and it still didn't crash. And it was crashing after the third, and the team was sitting there terrorized. They were just like, "Holy shit, that's gonna!" It was the one time it didn't crash, actually. So it was insane. But his vision and his ability to motivate people to go, you see that mountain there? We're going to chop that thing down and we're going to go right through it. And to get people excited, motivated, to care about something that almost seemed impossible. And most of your great leaders do that. There's something impossible, America at one point was a country that was the last one that wasn't involved in World War II. You look at Churchill, someone who stood up and said, we'll fight on the landing beaches, we'll fight on the seas, we'll fight in the oceans, whatever the costs may be. We'll just keep fighting. Without his sort of moxie, you have to wonder what would have happened with the European government if they would have if they would have fallen or folded and changed the face of history. And so, there are all sorts of different sites that you can do, but I love that. And I think most leaders should understand that they need to have a compelling view. You mentioned earlier about how people put their values up on the wall at the company and the people go, okay, so is this what we're supposed to do? I think it's funny. A lot of companies will put that, big PR messages about how these are our values and this is what we do. And I remember my early days as an employee, I'd sit and look at people's PR thing and be like, our leader's a lying asshole. Like, all the values that you put here are a joke. Like, this company does the complete opposite of everything here that you posted. Yeah. And the leader is untrustable. He's running a high school popularity contest management style rather than, a true leadership business sort of style. And, it's just a farce. It's gaslighting what you put up here. Yeah. And some companies do that. They think they can PR their way.
Some still do. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But they think they can PR way, BS their way to, I don't know, efficiency.
Yeah. But you mentioned Steve Jobs, and before that you mentioned Dean Carter. I mean, that interview I did with him was just so amazing. What a fabulous person he is. And some of the stories he brought from Patagonia, which was just set up. I mean, that was set up by a guy, Yvon Chouinard, all those years ago, because he felt that the pitons that he was a climber, and the pitons that people were using weren't, they were destroying. Well, actually, that was the second stage. But he just felt that they needed to build make better ones. And he had just attracted all these people. And, one of his early books was Let My People Go Surfing, because he just, and one of the stories that Dean talks about is, within a week of arriving as the head of HR, he had to go to one of their facilities where they were building a facility for nursing mothers, a creche, and he had to phone Melinda Chouinard, who's the wife of the founder, and say, look, we're about 2 months behind. And she said, okay, then you need to put a message out across the whole company that any woman who is nursing is now on full paid leave until the facilities are ready.
There you go.
So that is purpose. That is vision. It is strength of leadership and determination to live according to your values. Fabulous.
One of the blogs that you guys, I'm sorry, I think you're breaking up.
Example.
There you go. One of the blog posts you guys talk about, in fact, I probably shouldn't have mentioned this when I was mentioning Churchill and different things. One of the blog posts you guys have on your website, you talk about Zelensky and the leadership role model of Vladimir Zelensky in the Ukraine. Here's a guy who's living his leadership. I mean, you see him in, he's camped out in with his military folks. He's wearing the uniform. He's not dressing up. You see a complete difference between Putin and Zelensky in their approach. I mean, here's Zelensky. He's in the hospital, shaking hands. Very Churchillish. You see him out in dangerous zones, putting his life on the line. I think we all know his life is on the line, and that the Russian government would love to take him out, and he's not shirking from it. He's owning it, and so you're seeing that from a very real thing, and he's very engaged. And then you're also seeing the disengagement and the kind of the folly of the Russian leadership, and it's almost like a leadership sort of opposing views to take a look at.
It's fascinating. Putin with his enormous tables.
Yeah,
and everybody's sort of a mile from him, and Zelensky who's there, and I don't know. Zelensky came to the US, didn't he? And he spoke. Was it to Congress?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to Congress and stuff.
And the number of people who criticized him because he wasn't wearing a suit, and it's like, hello, this
is a man of war in war.
Yeah. And good for him. Good for him.
Yeah. I mean, it's the worst thing you can do is show that you're disconnected from your people. Yeah. And so, if he was to walk around like Putin in suits and, clean and living in whatever mansion, Putin lives in, meanwhile, here he is in probably the basement of wherever of some, military building, probably sleeping on not the best of beds, not leading a life of luxury. He's not sitting there eating, I don't know, whatever, steaks and, having a good time. You're not seeing him out having a luxurious life. This is a man who is betting on everything, and he's
and
doing.
Also,
go ahead.
Sorry. Also, he's a communicator. Every day he's communicating with his people.
Yeah.
And sometimes he's got bad news, sometimes he's got better news, but there's humility and there's transparency.
Mm-hmm.
Hallelujah. That's leadership.
Yeah. And you see this little country that certainly doesn't have the sizable sort of army and military of Russia, but you see the real difference in leadership applied between those two, dichotomies of opposing vision, and it's extraordinary, and it's amazing. It just shows what a leader can do. If he's got the tools, and certainly him being able to communicate like Churchill. Churchill's one of the biggest problems was trying to drag the U.S. into the war and our resistance to it, and that was his bet. His bet was he could finally convince us that we should enter the war. And that we would eventually come to him. You hear it in his speeches where he's like, if we can get I can't remember if he referred to it as the West or the New World. I think it was he referred to it as. I'm a big fan of Churchill. But having that vision, that's what Zelensky did. Is he went out to everybody and said, hey man, this affects us all. We're all, this is everyone's war. This is the world is in this. We all need we need your help. You can't leave us. You can't leave us to flounder. And a lot of people, most leaders, you don't see do that, especially in little scuffles that happen around the world. So I think it's a real lesson in leadership. I mean, he really inspires me with what he's done.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
There you go. You talk in some of your other articles, your article about 2023 10 leadership trends, about some other things: walk the walk, superb tacticians for the future, nurturers. I guess taking away, reducing toxicity and burnout in the workplace, high cultural intelligence, building better teams, innovators, empowerers. Anything you want to touch on there?
Well, I mentioned that this business about the masculine and the feminine. There's this guy. I don't know how big he is in the US. I think he is probably Andrew Tate, who he's a remarkable person, but he's talking about masculinity and how it's missing because we've all gone woke and we're just want to know about people's feelings and nothing else, and it's it's very complex, and he makes it sound very simple, and therefore it's very palatable to the millions of people who are now following him. But it isn't so simple. And actually, what we need is a combination of the masculine and the feminine. And he's very disparaging about the feminine. Everything's about a fight, and actually, that is an old paradigm. It's not about having a fight. We don't have to beat anyone else.
That's
if you look
true.
At, as a leader, all I need to do is be a better person than I was yesterday.
Yeah.
So I'm in competition with myself, or I'm setting myself standards, but I don't have to beat Joe next door. That is a waste of energy. And so one of the things that we're really, certainly in this country, and I think probably in the US as well, there's so much talk about now bullying and harassment, and there's scandals coming out almost every day in this country about policemen, rapists, and all this kind of thing. It's horrific. And so one of the things that really sets me on fire is helping organizations become safe. And that requires the feminine to come in and stand by the masculine, the functional ones, not the dysfunctional ones. And so
when you mean dysfunctional traits, do you mean traits when you say dysfunctional ones, or functional ones? You mean traits?
Absolutely.
Like human nature traits?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, and it's probably some of your listeners not going to like this, but just driving for success, just for success's sake, is not helpful. And if you look at leadership, and a lot of very successful in monetary terms leaders, they're driven in such a way that actually at some stage in their life, and this is what we've created a retreat for this, is for leaders to go in and explore themselves, because however successful they are, somehow they don't feel like they are successful. There's this void, this hole inside them, which is why you get so many leaders who are addicted to drink or to drugs. You look at these massive dysfunctional, super rich families, and it's like, no, you've got to start exploring what's driving you, and typically it's a very early experience. It's the father that did something that just clicked, in the child, or the mother, or the teacher. And what I'm really sort of keen on doing is helping people look at themselves much more deeply and say, okay, now I can see where I'm driven like that. I didn't need to do that. It was something that was suited me as a child, but I don't need to satisfy that driver anymore. And through that exploration, you can get an inner sense of peace. And I tell you what, leaders who have an inner sense of peace are way better leaders, and they are followed by people as opposed to having people dragged behind them.
I can see that. Steve Jobs was a great leader, but there was also a dark side to him. He's known as a credible asshole. He was a credible asshole. And he was a bit almost too driving. And it's kind of interesting. I remember seeing this dichotomy when I was growing up, watching leaders, learning from CEOs. There were some leaders I knew that they were incredible creators and drivers and successful, but very shortly behind them was this almost snowballing crash of a landslide of destruction that was chasing them. You see that sometimes in politics. You see that sometimes in great leaders, where they're creating a lot, but sometimes the mess they make with the creation they do almost overcomes them. And sometimes it does overcome them, where it catches up to them. And you can say, wow, you built, look at FTX, the big Bitcoin thing. Everyone vaulted him as a great leader. He's putting the name of his company on, arenas and stuff, and meeting with successful people and hobnobbing with them. And he has a mess and no one knows about it. And it's slowly, everyone's like, yeah, you create $1 billion business, blah, blah, blah. And he has a mess that's chasing him that somehow he's created, and it's growing just like a landslide.
Yeah.
And eventually it overcame him.
Yeah.
So whatever mistakes he made. And so you can be a great creator. You can be a great driver of success. What are some, there's some distinct differences between masculine and feminine. And someone had asked me years ago, a couple years ago, when I wrote my book, what the differences were with leadership, between leadership and men. And I'm like, well, I just wrote a book that basically talked about leadership, and I think if men and women both apply those principles, they'll be successful. I didn't write it from a sexual orientation sort of thing where I said, well, women do this or men do that. The principles I outlined were just what any successful person can do to achieve. And so it got me thinking, and I really started studying, like you talked about, the male and feminine, the masculine and the feminine. What are some traits in the feminine side do you feel that men need to pull over, or women need to utilize in the workplace, that are good, the good traits, as you mentioned?
Well, compassion is one.
Mm-hmm.
Empathy is another.
Yeah.
Listening.
Mm-hmm.
You go into a boardroom and watch the one woman in there try and get a word in edgeways,
Mm-hmm.
and the only way they can do it is by forcing, and that's one of the if you like, the dysfunctional masculine parts.
Mm-hmm.
And just to be clear, when you talk about masculine and feminine, when I talk about it, I'm not talking about men and women. We all have a masculine and a feminine side.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm interested in is what could you be like if you were fully expressed in all of your good traits,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to having to adopt ones that are not yours in order to survive or to thrive in a particular environment.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. Because I think a lot of societies are very dysfunctionally masculine oriented, and a young man who's tried to sort of express himself in some way finds himself, don't be a pussy, don't be a wet, don't be, and it's like, no, allow that person to express themselves in their way. I think there's this need to conform, to belong, to feel that you can belong, and people bend themselves in order to do that, and we lose so much. It's like disabled people, or people who have a disability, I think is probably a better way to put it. They get turned away from so many organizations to work, and yet with just a small adjustment, they could have the skills of that person, which could be actually perfect for a particular job.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this. Let me play devil's advocate on the other side. One of the aspects of the feminine side is egalitarianism, the equality. It's socialism, basically. Everyone has to be equal. Everyone has to get the same. Everyone has to be supportive. How do we keep that from bleeding into an organization where we become a little bit too huggy, a little bit too concerned with each other's feelings, as opposed to, we need to get some shit done around here. Like, we need to go accomplish shit. We just can't sit around and be in our feelings all day long and talk about, we can't be huggy. You can't be huggy anyway. And, HR is not going to like that. But I mean, basically what I'm asking is there a point that we become a little bit too feminine in an organization where, we're not getting stuff done. We're just being too huggy.
Well, you used the word egalitarian, and I that was an interesting word to use, I think. Mm-hmm. because you talk about DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think it's not about egalitarianism, but it is about equity. So in other words, if somebody, man or woman or whatever, is doing a job, they should get the same pay, for instance. And an awful lot of organizations use the excuse that it's a woman, for instance, and therefore they get a lesser rate of pay. Now that is wrong, in my view. It's wrong. But then you went on to say, well, if there's a situation and we've really got to drive to do what's necessary. I don't think that's there's a time and a place for everything, and I think sometimes when someone says, right, let's do it, we've got to do this, there's a problem, let's solve it and get on with it. And actually sometimes you get the little lone voice that says, well, excuse me, are you sure that's the problem that we need to deal with?
Exactly. Yeah.
And they go, no, never mind that. We're going to solve this problem. And of course, what a lot of organizations do is they ricochet from solving one problem, which creates all sorts of problems, to solving those problems. And, they never actually get to the root of something, where actually where I think the feminine would say is, let's just reflect for a minute. And let's make sure that we are solving the right problem. And so I think from that point of view, it has a power that has a place. But, when there's a fire in the office, you don't sit down and say, right, this is beginning to feel uncomfortable. I think we should all discuss what we should do now. You say, no, the bloody alarm's going out the door.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that still falls under logic and reasoning. I mean, one of my CEOs taught me a long time ago. He always had this one asshole negative guy on his board, and I'd go to the board meetings and I'd be like, oh God, it's John again. And John would go off about how he was negative Nancy basically, where whatever the idea was, he had a problem with it. He would know what was wrong with it, and it was it was draining sometimes because you're like. And so I went to him one time, my CEO friend, and I went, why do we keep having negative Nancy John come in the board, man? He's like a tuber. We used to call it back in the day, someone who tubes people out and depresses them. And my CEO friend said to me, he goes, Chris, anytime you build a board, because he really helped me become a CEO. He goes, anytime you build a board, he goes, you want one of those negative Nancy Joes on there. Because that guy is going to be wrong many of the time because he's so negative. But when that guy's fucking right, when he's on the money, he's going to make you millions or save you millions. So you want to listen to him. You want to collect this thing. But to me, that's logic and reasoning. Logic and reasoning is very masculine. And it says, okay, what are the best ideas? How do we collect these? Okay, so you've reasoned this and you have a different concept of what it takes, like you mentioned earlier, to solve the problem. And we're the weighing of ideas, the Ben Franklin, thing of drawing a line down thing and go, where the pros and cons, that sort of thing. To me, that's logic and reasoning. It falls under that. But I understand what you mentioned with having the, empathy and caring and I think as a leader, if people don't get that you care about them, that you have a intrinsic interest in the value of them and their success as a person, especially now, so with these new generations, it doesn't make that lot of a difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of stuff going on with corporations around the world and stuff that we need to do. Anything more we haven't touched on, because we're having a great discussion on leadership. I love this.
Leadership.
Anything more you want to tease out about who you guys are and what you do and how you do it? How can people work with you? What are the sort of clients that you usually work with? I mean, people that might be listening to this on our LinkedIn channels and stuff, how can people reach out to you, work with you, and what is your ideal client that they might be up for?
Well, fundamentally, we work at three levels. We work at an individual level, so that's one-to-one coaching, executive coaching. When you're at the top of an organization, it can be very lonely. Sometimes there is no one to share your sense of indecision or not when you're not quite sure. So a coach can really, really help with that. And so, I love doing that work. I have done, for the 30 years I've been running that business. Then at the team level, there's team coaching, but really what I love doing is facilitating. So, I would speak to the CEO and say, right, you're going to have an offsite. You're going to talk about your vision, your strategy, or something's going wrong you need to deal with. And what I'll do is enable the CEO or the chairman, whichever it is, to be a part of the meeting, as opposed to feeling like they've got to run it. It takes the weight off them, and then they can be just part of the process. So I love facilitating those meetings, and also typically what they say is, my God, this is the first meeting where actually we've stuck to the agenda and we've got to the end of the meeting and covered everything that we wanted to cover. Without an external, it can be really, really difficult, so I can introduce that kind of discipline.
There you go. So what's the best way for people to reach out to you and talk to you about working with you and your services?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Thom with an H, Thom Dennis, and I'm delighted to hear from people at Thom, THOM, at serenityin leadership.com. I think one of the things that's really developed in me is this sense of, how can I be of service? I want to help organizations be safer and happier places for people to work in. And, as we say, organizations thrive when people thrive.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, if a leader doesn't, have his people's best interest, they're not going to feel that they're a part of the journey. They're a part of the vision. You can, and I think, one thing that companies miscommunicate horribly is, I saw someone joking on LinkedIn one time with a meme saying, companies need to walk around, need to quit saying we're a family and everything, when, you can lay off, for example, Microsoft's laying 10,000 people off this week. Yeah. You need to quit selling the bullshit that we're a family company and we're one big family, kumbaya, and then you go and axe 10,000 people. You don't fire off huge parts of your family because, I don't know, the Thanksgiving turkey didn't turn out right or something.
No, I mean, that's interesting from a systemic constellation point of view. Mm-hmm. You can leave an organization, but you can't leave a family.
Yeah.
But
I've tried.
At the same time, to call your organization a family is a very dangerous thing.
Yeah.
Because look how dysfunctional most families are.
Yeah, I've tried to leave my family. They're all Mormons, so like, get me out of here. No, I'm just kidding. I love my family, at least some of them, and some of them love me, and not all of them. But I mean, I'm an atheist, and so I they don't love me as much. It's a religion thing. What can you do? But yeah, you can't choose your family. But yeah, the running around with that acronym and then behaving the opposite of that way is, like we talked about earlier, with the when people post their morals and ethics of the company, and you're just like, what is this? Like, it's farce that you posted here.
Yeah. And cynicism, it used to, I think there's one of the things that we talked about, the younger people are much less accepting of an environment where there is this dissonance between what senior management is saying and then what they're acting out.
Yeah.
It's just, and people walk with their feet now.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm not gonna work with an organization like yours. I'll go somewhere where I can feel that what I'm contributing to actually is making a difference.
Yeah. It's almost like, I think we're slowly moving to more and more this, people used to tell me that we go to this society eventually where it's not, it's not about the hardware work of, when I went to high school, I learned leatherworking, woodworking, and machine shop, for metal. And boy, those skills really paid off. But there was things I learned from them that were important in the moxie of my personality or development or learning, or I don't know. I just always worried in metal shop because the metal shop teacher was missing most of his fingers from the I remember looking at him going, I'm not sure I want this as a career. You're not an advertisement for someone to be successful in metallurgy. But there were people that like that and that excel in it. Everyone's got a job, but we moved from this, I was in an environment that grew up where US Steel was number one on the Dow Jones as the top most worth business in the world. Now we're in an environment where some of the top businesses are into electronics and more intellectual based stuff. Even like Microsoft doesn't sell a hard copy of their software so much anymore as they do, a very soft cloud version of their stuff. So, we moving into this environment of entrepreneurism where we all sell ideas and consult each other as opposed to we sweat in some factory getting dirty and asbestos and everything. And so people have talked about that, and it's almost kind of like we're progressing that way with Gen Z. They want that purpose, and a lot of things you see in entrepreneurs is they want a life that they feel makes a difference. They're finding their purpose in life.
Yeah.
And it's their purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'd be more successful. I worked at IBM, but to me, I wouldn't trade my purpose for the world.
No, and that's so important. But it's interesting. I was talking to the CEO of an oil refinery not that long ago, and he was saying, I'm having such trouble recruiting really high grade graduates now. He said, because they just look at the oil industry and they say, no.
Yeah.
Which is, and yet, it's a great industry. It has to die off. And, but, I think people tend often not to realize the depth and the extent of oil and how many products actually are based on some, and so it's not just about electric cars, it's much bigger than that. So anyway, it's a big challenge for him.
Definitely. And a big challenge for every employer nowadays. I'm not sure what's going on your side of the world. I'm sure it's closely the same line after COVID. Like you mentioned earlier in the show, a lot of people have retired and left the market that were the elderly folks, even people in my age group of 50s, to cash out their 401ks and said, fuck it, I'm going to go live my purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, they're men who realize that we tend to die off around 60 and 70. Women outlast us in living. And some of my men friends just said, fuck it, I'm cashing my 401k and living my life because I'm not going to live to enjoy this damn thing. Yeah. And they may be short-sighted. They may end up living till 90 or 100 and being like, oh, shit. But, I think the world that we live in where, we need to find purpose. Yeah, it's kind of interesting dichotomy. A lot of these young people, especially the Gen Zers, I think 2 out of 3 Gen Zers see themselves as wanting to be TikTok stars. We have this helicopter parenting generation, the participation trophy generation. Certainly, the millennials have here in America have one of the worst futures of ever, because their styles of leadership and business working didn't work out for them. And it hasn't. Their retirement funds are dead for the most part. And so there's a real concern what their future is. And Gen Z is following with a more lackadaisical, if you want to call it that, I'll call it that, in my opinion, sort of attitudes in this whole kumbaya egalitarianism of the participation trophy. And that's really what that comes from their raising. So I'm kind of concerned. It may be that the reason I'm saying this is that maybe that the oil executive, the reason he's not getting people, and we're seeing this in America, you guys have a different trade system there in Europe because you teach people trades very early on and kind of identify what they're good at. Here in America, we just throw everything at you and teach you everything that you'll never use in your life except for, I don't know, how to wipe your own butt. To me, my schooling, the most important thing I learned was how to do QWERTY typing on a keyboard. And, not have to sit and henpeck. That's the most important thing I got from my schooling and the most valuable return on investment. There may have been other people that learned stuff like doctors, and I don't know, maybe they went to English teaching things, but for me, that was the most important thing. And a lot of it was bullshit that I didn't need to be taught. And over in Europe, you guys are better at just getting right to the point of treating people what their skills are. But over here, the participation generation, they all just want to be YouTube stars and Twitch stars and TikTok stars. And so a lot of the blue collar businesses, like your friend in the oil business, and a lot of, I've even got people that have been on the show that do robotics, but they do industrial robotics. So the robotics is a technology where you're dealing with computers and you're dealing with the very intellectual property of coding computers and repairing them. But the robotic, and these guys can make $100,000 to $200,000 a year. And it's very specialized where it doesn't take a lot of training, but once you know how to deal with the robots and stuff. But the robots are working in highly industrial facilities, even like welding and different things like that. And the newest generation doesn't want to work in those environments. They see those environments of, the old type we talked about earlier, like the U.S. Steel and the dirtiness, but they're still like, intellectual, groundbreaking technology environments, but they have that sort of attitude. And sometimes I wonder how much of that is like what you mentioned earlier, that whole sort of, well, that's oil, that's a bad industry, or, this is a dirty sort of warehousing, manufacturing sort of thing that we don't like anymore. And it's a lot of work. We don't want to get our fingernails dirty. Or it's more that, participation trophy thing where they just want to be, like over here, they just all want to be influencers. It's kind of crazy. And, you're like, you just want to be influencers? Like, how much does that pay? Is that like a job that's got a great 401k? I don't know. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but that's just kind of some of the interesting things I see going on over here.
Yeah, I suppose I'm more activated by not so much what people are aspiring to do. Yeah, and there's lots of people who want to be influencers and that, but I think it's more about what is the influence on these people.
Yeah.
And this I talked a little bit about it earlier, this need, this elemental need that we have to belong, to feel that we belong. And I think social media is extraordinary in how it's drawing people in, so they feel that they're part of a group and that, and yet and then they become extremely influenced by that. And the whole way that social media is structured is that you just get more and more stuff that accentuates and amplifies what you're looking and seeing, and any contrary view is just eliminated, so you don't get any of that. And I think that's very dangerous, because it adds to the polarization, which is pretty awful on both sides of the Atlantic now. Where was it? Yeah, Finland. Now that they're teaching children from a very early age at school to question social media and to look for second opinions and to check the veracity of things that they're reading. I think that's amazing. And what that's doing is helping people to be independent and be independent thinkers, as opposed to just seeing something and it's sort of fitting with a paradigm that they're in. I think that's super scary, that bit.
I really like that idea. We need to teach critical thinking more, especially I don't know, on your end of the world, you guys are pretty smart. Britons are always smart, in my opinion. Over here, we're just a bunch of idiots running around, drunken idiots half the time, going, my Canadian friends go, "Oh, geez, do we have to live next to you people?" That's a joke, folks. But I mean, you've seen us lately. I mean,
yeah. Well, I lived in the US for 6 years, and I loved it. But the thing is, it's a big place, and you get all sorts.
Yeah.
I think your media is pretty messed up.
Yeah. Well, we're a melting point of idiocy. I mean, smart ideas. Did I say idiocy? I don't know. We're a melting pot of, I don't know, whatever. It's all bubbling and boiling, and just we're an interesting group of people. But I mean, we've done really well. I mean, what is it, since the 1940s or 50s, we've been known as the asshole Americans. So we own it. Those damn Yankees. What are we gonna do? But we did steal off one of your Royals, so there you go. We're still stealing stuff off you guys.
There is a subject.
250 years. They're still. The Queen's like, not again. We got fooled again. Damn it. The Who was right. Pete Townshend, thanks. We don't get fooled again. I'm not even sure that that's what that song was about, but I think it was. I think it was about the American Revolution, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Okay, well, you can call. Pete's over on your end of the world. I'll let you call him and ask him. Well, it's been wonderful and insightful. It's been a great discussion, Thom, about leadership and companies and, some of the things that people have to address and leaders that need to address of what's going on in this new world, this new future. And like you mentioned, a lot of my fellow leaders are struggling with the Gen Z thing, but, this is the future. And they're probably going to bring changes that hopefully make things better. And if not, well...
No, I believe that they will. I really do believe that they will. But this world has got to go through a. I mean, it's like we're a snake's shaking off an old skin.
Yeah.
And it's going to take some years yet, and they're going to be bumpy, hard, challenging years.
Mm-hmm.
But then I really think that generation will come good.
It will be interesting. I mean, we have fewer men going to college than ever. We have a lot of women. There's interesting dichotomies going on with, shrinking populations. China, saw its first drop. Japan as well. Japan is really in the spin out cycle that no one's getting married, no one's having family, no one's having kids. Even in Europe, you have more women in Europe that are single over the age of 30 that have never been married, no kids, than are not. So we have some generational things that are going on with what's happening. And here in America, there's a lot of hypergamy where women marry up and they marry guys who are earning more money and providers. And so without these young men going to colleges, they're not going to be the high earner guys. And now we're seeing like very large companies that are saying we're not going to require college education anymore. They're recognizing that the systems are changing. Even our colleges are now under assault, where they're realizing that everyone's kind of woken up to the fact that the amount that they were charging for colleges here in America didn't equate to a return on investment and turned into almost a lifetime of slavery, indentured servitude towards a payment for your college education. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting, the journey.
Terrible thing, particularly the interest rate that they charge.
Oh yeah.
Which I've never seen the logic in that. I'm sure there is one, but
no, there's no logic to it. There's profit. We have what's called unbridled capitalism in this world. You guys should try it over there sometime, but don't. It's good to have balance. It's good to have some things regulated.
It hurts.
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, the smarter you can make your population, the better. But some politicians like dumb populations. Anyway, really insightful, Thom, to have you on the show. Great to have you. Give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs, wherever you want people to follow you.
serenityinleadership.com, and my email, Thom, THOM, at serenityinleadership.com. And I'd love to hear from people. The people may have agreed or disagreed with things that we've said. It would be really nice really interesting to hear what this conversation, which has been great, has evoked in people. Yeah,
there you go. I'm sure we'll get the comments, especially on YouTube. We always get those. Sometimes they're insane, sometimes they're not. YouTube's social media is always one of those things that you get the comments like, you're stupid, and they, then they'll cite something about aliens or the flatness of the earth or something, and you're just like, okay, well, there's you. But welcome to the world. Anyway, Thom, it's been great to have you on. Thanks for being on the show.
Chris. Yeah,
thank you.
Brilliant.
There you go. And thanks, Mounties, for tuning in. We certainly appreciate you guys being here. Without you guys, we wouldn't bother. We just wouldn't even bother. Well, I probably bother with Thom. We sit and have an intellectual conversation. But we're glad you joined us. In the meantime, refer the show to your family, friends, relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss. The big 130,000 LinkedIn group, the LinkedIn newsletter. Follow that. The Chris Voss Show on LinkedIn. We just launched one of our new shows. We should talk about that. just launched yesterday called Las Vegas Podcast. We're going to be interviewing our good friends in Las Vegas, leaders and the businesses and stuff like that. So we're launching that. Watch for that. I think it's on iTunes and stuff now. Thanks for tuning in, people. Be good to each other. Stay safe. And we'll see you next.